All right. Today we are in part 5 of our study in the book of Ecclesiastes, and we'll be talking about time, probably the most famous passage in the whole book, the poem that the writer gives us about time and what God is doing in time and how we can deal with that. So if you will join me in Ecclesiastes chapter 3, starting in verse 1. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, starting in verse 1. For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to tear, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which is already has been, and which is to be already has been. And God seeks what has been driven away. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness. In the place of righteousness, even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beasts is all the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and man has no advantage over the beasts, for all is vanity. All go to one place. All are from the dust, and to dust all return. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? And may God add a blessing to the reading of his word. Father, thank you for your word that you have given us. And Father, may we see just how we can have hope in you. Because under the sun, we don't see a whole lot to have hope in. Father, we thank you for what you will do, and it is in the name of your Son that we pray. Amen. So first we come to a time for everything. That God is in control. God knows what he's doing. God has set certain times, and that we should know that things don't always stay the same, that things aren't always a time for planting. I mean, I'm sure a farmer wouldn't like it if it was all planting and no harvest. You know, it's a hard way to make a living. But everything has its time. Everything has a time that God has set. It says here, for everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. And so the writer here gives us his opening sentence that this is the gist of the whole poem. And then it starts off with the opposites and showing through that it's a poetical thing called merism, that you have one opposite from another, and it's including everything in between. Like, we might say from sun up to sundown, that's everything in between all day long. And he says, a time to be born and a time to die, covering all of human life. That we are born and we are that we die, those times aren't set by us. I can't control when I'm born, and God knows when my time will be up here on this earth. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. So even there, in the plant world, a farmer goes out and sows seed, but there's a time to do that. And you miss that time and things don't turn out so well, that we don't have as much control over that. Irrigation and such helps, but it can't guarantee everything, that there's that time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to go out and harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. So here you can see that there is a time for killing, and of course this would be not a time to murder. There's never a good time for murder, but that there is a time for war, or there is a time for capital punishment. And there's also a time for healing, to try and heal those who are hurting. A time to break down, a time to build up. And here in this time, you think of city walls. That, there's a time to go to war, and there's a time to break down those walls, and then there's a time to build them up. Jerusalem experienced both of those. That their walls were torn down when Nebuchadnezzar came and tore the city of Jerusalem apart. And then Zerubbabel came back, and they rebuilt the temple, and they came and they built up the walls of Jerusalem under Nehemiah and all of that. And that wasn't just Jerusalem, that was many cities. In fact, if you are an archaeologist in Israel, they have what are called tells, and they are mounds that cities sit on. So the city would come and be destroyed by an enemy. The people would regroup and later rebuild. You just kind of bury what was there and rebuild the city on top. Maybe 100 years later, here comes another army, tears it down, and they regroup, rebuild on top. And so you get these big mounds that start happening in cities. And the archaeologists dig down through the layers to see, okay, during this time, they had this kind of pottery, and so these were the people living there, and dig down a little deeper. Then before that was this people, and they can see all of those things. There's a time to weep and a time to laugh. And just like that in our lives, there are times where we're sad. There are times where things happen and it hurts, and we mourn, and others mourn with us, or maybe we're mourning with someone else, and we are helping them as best we can. And then there's a time to laugh. There's a time for joy. And the next goes along with it, a time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to express grieving, and then a time to express joy and jubilation. We think of David dancing before the ark of the Lord as it was coming into Jerusalem, that he was showing his joy and jubilation at the ark of the covenant coming in, that they would worship God there. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. And here, the imagery, it's hard to know exactly what's being talked about, but you think, maybe a time for casting stones, you're getting them out of your field to be able to plow it, because plows don't go through rocks too well. And then gathering them together, that you are, maybe gathering them to build a wall or a house or whatever, that there's a time for both of those. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time for showing love and a time for not showing love. That those different times during life. A time to seek and a time to lose. Just like there's a time to keep looking for something that maybe you've lost. And then maybe there's a time to realize, I wonder if it got in the trash can and the garbage truck's already come and it's gone. So I just need to move on from that and say, okay, well, time to just give it up and let it go. And a time to keep and a time to cast away. Just went through that this week. Is, how long do you keep a vehicle and keep saying, I can fix it, I can fix it. And when is it time to go see Terry and say, all right, and we need to replace it. Just had that this week. That's a hard decision to make sometimes, because you think, I can fix it, I can keep it going, I can keep doing this. Or, you can see when that goes awry, if you see an episode of Hoarders on TV, where someone doesn't know when it's time to get rid of things. Of course, that's an actual mental illness, and they need a lot of help. But, you see that's where that's gone awry. They don't know when it's time to get rid of things. And for some reason, in their mind, they find security in holding on to things, and some of it could be a fear that they may do without. You might see that in someone that lived during the Depression, that they did without a whole bunch, and they think, I never want to go through that again. So they're not going to get rid of anything, they're going to reuse it. And then someone that has never been through that, they might be on the opposite end and they're wasteful. they get rid of things like, they could use that. There was nothing wrong with it. And so you can have on both ends of, are you someone that gets rid of things way before it? Or maybe you have I haven't used this in, 2 years, so I get rid of it, and just the next week, that's when you need it. Sometimes it happens that way. But that there's a time for everything there. There's a time to tear, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak. And here's, reading through this, that some were looking at this as mourning. In their culture, when you were mourning, you would tear your clothes and put ashes on your head to show you were in mourning. Just like nowadays, sometimes in some cultures, you may wear black to a funeral to show that you were mourning. And so that was their symbol. They would tear their clothes. And then after the time of mourning, you take those clothes, you'd sew them back up. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. That you remember Job's friends. The most help they were for Job is when they were there and just silent. That they were there mourning with him, and they gave him the most help when they didn't speak. After they started speaking, they were really bad for him. Just like Tim Hawkins has talked about that. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's a Christian comedian. Talked about Job, and Satan is there afflicting him. And said, one of the demons would say to Satan, "Hey, you forgot about his wife." I said, "Oh no, I didn't. No. I know what I'm doing here." Because his wife, curse God and let yourself be dead. So Satan didn't take her away from him. But that there with Job, even we see that time to keep silence, a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. That there's a time for showing love, there's a time in life where there's hate, a time for war and a time for peace. And we're not getting into just war theory or any of those things, like when is it right to go to war and when is it not and all of that. But just that we see in the course of human events, that we see through history that there are times of peace, there are times of war. And you know what? None of us here are in government. None of us here can declare war or not declare war, so we're kind of the pawns in all of that. And so it just comes upon us as it happens. We don't have a whole lot of control over it, but we can roll with the punches. And that's kind of what the writer is getting at here, is that we don't always know what's going on in the timing, but God knows the perfect timing for everything. Does he always reveal his reasoning to us? No. Some of that is why we have to trust God. That's why we have to trust him and know, you know what, God, I can't see what's going on here, but Lord, I know you do. And so I'm going to trust you through this. And also, this can be hard, but be thankful in everything. Some of those we think, I'm thankful for the happy. I'm not thankful for the sad. No, we need to be thankful in all of our circumstances, that we can find something to be thankful for. 1 Thessalonians 5:18 talks about that. Paul says, in every situation, give thanks. That we are to be thankful to God even when things are hard. We can know that, okay, Lord, I have joy. And joy is different from happiness. Happiness is based upon your circumstances. Joy is looking beyond your circumstances, finding joy even in the midst of suffering and pain, knowing that there's something better coming, that there is something better coming when we can be with God for eternity. We know that even if we suffer, even if we face martyrdom, that we can have joy because we know that God knows what he's doing. God is working things out, and we have something much better beyond this life. Even on our best day here, heaven's going to be better. And on our worst days here, we can remember that and know that, you know what, something better is coming. But then we go on to man's work. And, especially in a farming society, they dealt with all of these cycles. The planting cycle, the harvest cycle, the rainy season, the dry season. Especially in Israel, they had early rains and late rains, and you just had to trust God that those late rains would come and that your crops would do okay. And so man then has to work in all of this, and he says, what gain has the worker from his toil? Okay, we go through all these cycles. Is there any gain? Is there any benefit for anybody? And work is this way. Work is not always a joy, partly because of what happened back in Genesis. If we look at Genesis 3:17-19, it says, "And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return." And you think, you go back 100 years ago, this was even more true than it is now. Think of the labor of having to walk behind a horse that is pulling a plow and do that all day. And just the sweat of your brow to try and just get enough to live on. And it's still hard work today, don't get me wrong, but it's a little different than walking behind a horse all day that's pulling the plow for you and all that. But even with tractors, still hard work. Still a lot of uncertainty. Still, no guarantee on all of that. And, even in our work today, it's not just farmers that face that. It can be anyone in the work that they are doing, that they can find frustration, they can find, things don't always work out the way that you hoped they would, or those sorts of things, that there can be lots of that. He goes on in verse 10, "I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with." It says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." And maybe your version says something different, because this word can have different meanings in different contexts. It can also mean suitable or appropriate, that God has made everything work out the way it's supposed to in its time. That, we don't see the plants springing up in the dead of winter, then being killed off by the frost because it's the middle of December, or, those sorts of things where the timing is just way off. That God has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, He has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. And this is one of those things that makes humanity different from the animals, that we are made in God's image. And God has put eternity into our hearts, that we are looking beyond just today. An animal is happy if it goes out and just finds the grass it needs to eat. Or, the dog is happy if you give him food and water and, that he has a nice couch to lay on. Or, those sorts of things. The dog isn't looking 20, 30 years into the future. It's not thinking about, children and grandchildren and what kind of world will I leave for them. It's, hey, I got food in my bowl. I got someone to scratch my ears, and I got a couch to lay on. I am set. I am good. That animals think about things differently than we do. And so, but yet God put eternity on our hearts. We long for something beyond. We have a sense that there's more to this life. And yet still there is frustration because we don't know what God is doing perfectly. We can't find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. We want to know, we long to know, we want to figure out life. But yet there's still frustration here because we don't know all of what God is doing. And you think, how different would it have been if Adam and Eve had not sinned? If we still could walk with God in the garden and talk with God and know God. And that's the kind of relationship we will have in heaven. But for now we have to wait, and our hearts long for that kind of relationship, for something beyond just this life, for something beyond the daily grind, that we long for that. But God can provide that. He says, "I perceive that there's nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in his toil. This is God's gift to man." And so here you remember he's talking about life under the sun. And he's saying, what can you do in this life? Enjoy your work. Enjoy what God has given you to do. Enjoy the fruits of your labor, to eat and drink, and to do good as long as you can. Enjoy the gifts God has given you, to enjoy this life. Now the problem is, when you set up those gifts as idols, that's when life falls apart. But to enjoy the fruits of your labor, enjoy what God has done for you and given you, that is a good thing. that we should remember it and be thankful for it as well. That we are thankful to God for what he has done, that we realize God has given us the ability to get wealth, that it's us, that yes, we work and we toil and we labor, but it is God that has given us that ability. He says, I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. You know, God's works are different from our works. We should fear God. We should, and this isn't the cowering fear like we might feel towards, say, like a poisonous snake across our path, or something like that, where it's fear, oh, it's going to kill me, or something like that. But it's the fear of respect. That we respect God, we reverence God for what he has done. We see his works, and his works are different from us. And he said, that which is, already has been. That which is to be, already has been. And so here we see the cyclical things of just how we can be frustrated in this life. That, you know, we think, well, what am I gaining for all that I have done? What have I done that will bring any significance? Well, you know, we can do those things that matter for eternity. Maybe while you're laboring, you have a chance to talk to someone and tell them about Jesus. You have a chance to tell them the gospel, and they believe, and then you are finding significance in that, what you have done for God. That might be more significant than your work, but yet it is something that you have done for God that will last for eternity. And so if we just focus on this world, yes, you're going to find it frustrating. You're going to find it meaningless. You're going to find it unfulfilling. It says that God seeks what has been driven away, and that God is even active in those things. So God is working out his plan in history. We can't always see it. I like the illustration I've used before, the tapestry, that if you look at the back of the tapestry, you see a bunch of different colors of thread just all knotted in a mess. If you look at the front, you see a pretty picture. We see the back. We don't quite know how it's working. God sees the front. He's making the pretty picture. And so we trust him that he is working that out. And we trust God even when we don't understand it. That we trust him. You know, one commentator I was reading put it as, you know, parents that are, you know, they have to worry about the bills. They have to worry about putting food on the table. They have to worry about, you know, doctor visits and all of those things. What's the job of the child in all of that? Job of the child? Trust mom and dad and play. You know, and we are like that with God. That we don't have it all figured out. We don't understand it. So we are to trust God and enjoy what he's given us. You know, to maybe put it even a little more simpler, trust God and play. As we enjoy the work he's given us, as we enjoy the fruits of our labors, God knows what he's doing, so we are going to trust him. And also, what he is pointing out here, find joy in the everyday. In the everyday things of life. Find joy in a job well done. Find joy in the accomplishments every day. Find joy in what you are doing. Find joy in bringing a smile to someone's face. That we find joy in what God gives us every day. But then, as you're looking at things under the sun, as the writer is, well, what about the end? What about death? How does that affect all of this? And so it comes to a time for death. But there we go. It says, moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness, and in the place of righteousness, even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. And so here he's saying, well, okay, if everything is ideal, we could all find joy in our work, we would all have enough to eat, we would all have a roof over our heads. You know, that's kind of the promise even of communism. That, hey, if we all band together, and if we distribute all the wealth equally, that everybody's going to be happy. What happens when you get humans involved? The only rich are the party members. The only rich are the leaders and the elite, and everybody is equally miserable. Everybody is equally, struggling along. And we've seen that in the failure of communism. Then you get to capitalism, you think, oh, it must be better. Well, in some ways, yeah. But we still have our poor. We still have those who are struggling just to get food to eat. And we have the rich who get richer, the poor who get poorer. It's not a perfect system. And so, why is that? Well, human beings are sinful. Where there should be justice, there's injustice. Where there should be righteousness, there's unrighteousness. We even see this in our own politics. You flip on the news, what are they talking about? Unrighteousness of our leaders. It's there. And I don't care what party you're looking at, it's in both. It's there because people are evil. And that's why we can't put our trust in politics to make things right. Should we vote and act responsibly and understand what the candidates believe? Yes. But don't expect them to be a savior. Don't expect them to make America perfect, because it ain't happening until Christ comes back. There is corruption everywhere. There is evil everywhere. And even in the courts. And one commentator pointed out, he said, in America we may not understand this as much. I mean, yes, there's corruption and all of that. But imagine the injustice and how you would feel about it if you were a Jew in Nazi Germany. Or if you were just looking at all these different places where people were just treated unfairly. We can look around through history and see that happen all the time. And so, yes, there is injustice. But with God, there is justice. We see in Genesis 18:25, far be it from you to do such a thing, to put the righteous to death with the wicked, so that the righteous fares the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do what is just? This is Abraham pleading with God for Sodom and Gomorrah. Oh, if you find just 50 righteous. Okay, yeah, if I find 50, I won't destroy the city. And Abraham knew the city. He said, well, what if you can't find 50? What if you only find 30? Then I'll spare the city. What if you only find 20? And he goes on down. And what do we see? God still destroyed the city, but he got righteous Lot out of there. And that the judge of all the earth will do what is right. He will judge. And while we see injustice around us, we know God will make that right. I mean, all of us can probably think of someone who is a notorious sinner or an evil person that seemed to get away with it. You think, oh man, what happened? Like Shannon and I were watching a show on the History Channel called Hunting Hitler. And there's evidence that maybe he was able to escape Germany and he really didn't commit suicide. That was some other dead body they had. And he made it to Argentina and lived out his days. And you think, oh, what if that did happen? I mean, then did he face justice at all? Well, he had to face God eventually. That there will be justice that way. Going on again in verse 18, I said in my heart that with regard to the children of man, that God is testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happens to the beasts is the same. And so here the author is saying God is using these things to try to extinguish pride in our hearts, that we might think, oh, we are great, we are something great. No, God can use circumstances in our life to bring us to humility and realize we aren't all that great. And here he compares us to beasts, to animals. It says, as one dies, so dies the other. That both man and animals, well, they both die. They both have an end to their lives. They all have the same breath. We both breathe air. And man has no advantage over the beast for all his vanity. That we don't live forever. But yet, we can feel that tension of we want to lift ourselves up, yet we all have the same end. It says, all go to one place, the grave. All are from the dust, and to dust shall return. That, God made our bodies from the dust of the ground. That he made the animals, that they, appeared from the earth. And so, from dust to dust, that's where that line comes from. We see something similar in Psalm 49, but the difference here, the author of Ecclesiastes is talking about life under the sun. But here, in Psalm 49, the author is looking at it even from God's perspective. It So it says, to the choir master, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Hear this, all peoples. Give ear, all inhabitants of the world, both low and high, rich and poor together. My mouth shall speak wisdom, and the meditation of my heart shall be understanding. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to the music of the lyre. Why should I fear in times of trouble, when the iniquity of those who cheat me surrounds me? Those who trust in their wealth, the boast of the abundance of their riches. Truly no man can ransom another, or give to God the price of his life. For the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice, that he should live on forever and never see the pit. For he sees that even the wise die, the fool and the stupid alike must perish, and leave their wealth to others. Their graves are their homes forever, their dwelling places to all generations, though they call lands by their own names. Man in his pomp will not remain. He is like the beasts that perish. This is the path of those who have foolish confidence. Yet after them people approve of their boast, Selah. Like sheep they are appointed for Sheol. Death shall be their shepherd, and the upright shall rule over them in the morning. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol, with no place to dwell. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me, Selah. Be not afraid when a man becomes rich, when the glory of his house increases. For when he dies, he will carry nothing away. His glory will not go down after him. For though, while he lives, he counts himself blessed, and though you get praise when you do well for yourself, his soul will go to the generation of his fathers, who will never again see light. Man in his pomp, yet without understanding, is like the beasts that perish. And so there the psalmist is looking at it from God's perspective. You know, man will lift himself up. I am so great. I have done all these things. It says from God's perspective, no. You are evil, and you will go to the same place. And so there we have kind of the same sort of idea, yet with a different perspective. And then he goes on, he says, who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? And they're asking that question where if you didn't have the revelation in the Bible of heaven, think about how much death would hurt. Think about how much, facing that yourself or seeing your loved ones, that would hurt. But we can have hope because of what Christ has done, because heaven has been revealed, that we can have hope even through that. And so here, the author of Ecclesiastes was looking at this as like, oh man, what can become of this? What can happen? You know, who knows whether this or that will happen? But yet, we know because God has told us. We know because we have further revelation that God has given to us. And he said, so I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? So yes, it is worldly wisdom to enjoy your work, but don't lose sight of what comes after. Don't lose sight of eternity, and do what will count in eternity. You see, even here, the author realized God would bring justice in this time. He didn't have all of the facts beyond or in front of him. In the Old Testament, we see some veiled references to resurrection, some veiled references to an afterlife, but nothing near the detail that we have in the New Testament. They knew there was maybe something. They knew that something was coming, but they didn't know exactly what. But yet, there was still some hope in God. They just didn't have all of the details. But eventually God will bring justice. You know, we know if we see, say if they do find definitive evidence that, yes, Hitler did make it to Argentina and he lived out his days in peace. And he didn't see justice. Yeah, he did. He will have to face God. And he will find justice there. We also know that death comes for all of us. What is it Benjamin Franklin said? There's nothing certain except death and taxes. You know, that it will come for all of us. And so it is good to think about that, and it's good to be ready, because God will bring justice. Everything you do, God will bring justice. And the question is, will the justice be done upon you forever in hell? Or will justice be done upon Jesus on the cross, who will pay the penalty for all who believe in him? Because all of us deserve God's wrath. All of us deserve his justice. You know, when we look around and we think, oh, what if this person didn't get his due? Well, what about us? I don't want to get my due. I don't want to face God's wrath for my sin, because I deserve it too. I have done evil things too. I have not lived a perfect life, and I deserve God's wrath. But God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him, that every person who believes in him shall not perish, but shall have everlasting life. That is our promise. That Jesus went to the cross and he took the wrath that we deserved, nailed upon the cross. He lived a perfect life. He fulfilled the law in our stead. And then he died in our place upon the cross. So that when we face God, we don't face his wrath, because Jesus already took it. We will be accepted by him, loved by him, adopted into his family as sons and daughters. That is the promise that we have. And we know that, yes, God will bring justice. Death comes for all of us. God will make that right. But also, now is the time to make sure that we are right before God. You see, under the sun, this is a frustration. Under the sun, death frustrates us. But to those who know Christ, we have hope. To those who know Christ, we have hope for good beyond, that we can face whatever we may face here. You think of the Apostle Paul, all that he faced. You know, he was flogged, he was stoned, he was shipwrecked, he was beaten. All of those things, and some of that more than once. But yet, he knew what was coming after. It wouldn't be worth it if this life was all there is. But it is worth it because of what is coming after. It is worth it to follow God. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your words you have given us, and thank you for your love for us. Thank you for the great promises we have in the gospel, that Jesus came and died in the place of sinners, and that all who believe in him will be saved from their sin, will be saved from facing your wrath, but instead be adopted into your family. Thank you for such great promises. And it is in the name of your Son that we pray.